Welcome to everyone who's just joined me from the radio side of things on 710 KNUS. Thank you. I'm Steffan Tubbs, proud to be with you tonight and our one-on-one virtual town hall with Congressman Ken Buck. Just want to remind you this is a private event for 710 KNUS club members. Any other use of this event, or any pictures, descriptions, or accounts of the event without the express written consent of Salem Media of Colorado is prohibited. That's what the lawyers want me to say. Proud to welcome in Colorado Congressman Ken Buck. And Ken, I know you've probably had a busy day, so thank you so much for joining us and welcome to our virtual town hall.
Thank you very much, Steffan. This is the first time I have seen you. We have been on the radio together for years now, and it's a pleasure to see you in person and interact in this way.
Well, thank you, Congressman. You have always, I just want to be upfront and always transparent that Ken Buck has always, to our viewers, always been more than willing to come on the show, and we greatly appreciate it. I want to start first, and just so Congressman, you know how this will work, and I'm sure you've been briefed on this, and our viewers, many people from literally around the country have sent in questions, and they have been culled, and I have not seen these questions until tonight. No one is asking me to say anything. No one from the Ken Buck campaign or his congressional office has told me not to say this or do that. So I just want to be upfront and transparent that this is a no-holds-barred thing, and with that, even more respect to the congressman. I want to start first with obviously what we have to talk about in this country right now. And we'll get into the aspects of this, but these following questions will be my own, and then we'll get to our viewer questions as well. I want to know what, Congressman, what was that time, the first time that you saw the George Floyd cell phone video? And had you heard about the George Floyd death before you saw that? And then, of course, your reaction.
I had heard about the death before I saw the video, and I have to tell you, it is startling. I have been in law enforcement for 25 years, and I still consider myself a prosecutor acting as a congressman and not a congressman. And my heart has always been with law enforcement. And to see that kind of brutality and senseless violence and really lack of compassion for life was startling to me. I think there are 99.9% of the police officers in this country are great people who do a great job and have compassion for the community. And then you've got a bad apple every once in a while. And that was a perfect example of someone who should never have been a police officer, who was disciplined a number of times, who should have been thrown off of that force long before anything like that happened. And it's terrifying that those things happen. And it's, if it brings about positive change, it's still not worth a life, but at least hopefully we can make some positive change out of what happened.
You know, of members of Congress right now, there's nobody that would know any more than you as to the relationship and the importance of having good relations with the police department. I believe you were elected as the Weld County District Attorney 3 different terms, and you know the importance of that. I'm sure in your career you have heard of maybe some of those bad apples. But with that said, I got to ask you how you feel. And I make it very clear on my show that I'm very pro-police, and if anybody out there is not upholding his or her, duty to protect and serve, they should not be protecting and serving. But let me ask you about the talk that has just been so pervasive of defunding or disbanding police departments. To me, it is just it's a very surprising knee-jerk reaction.
Well, Steffan, let me back up 1 second.
Sure.
And respond to something that you said in before the question, and that I prosecuted police officers. I prosecuted successfully police officers. When my prosecutors brought a case to trial against a police officer, the police officers were found guilty because we charged them with what they had done, and the citizens of Weld County, where I was district attorney, believed the evidence and convicted. And it's not easy to convict a police officer, but it is appropriate on occasion when there is a bad apple. Having said that, I think that it is I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent.
Oh, that's okay.
What was your question?
Yeah, Congressman, the call, as you've heard, defunding and disbanding the police departments.
Right. It's ludicrous. What do we do? I have to tell you, if some liberal Democrat wants to call a social worker when someone is breaking into their home, they can go ahead and do that. That is not going to be the course of action that I choose, and to the idea that we don't need police to make sure that this country doesn't devolve into chaos is just absolute crazy. Should we do things differently? Absolutely, and we are looking at doing things differently in Congress, and the state legislatures are looking at doing things differently, and each police department should examine within to see what can be done differently. But the idea that we don't need police, or we should defund police, or we should punish all police departments because of the really reckless and dangerous and violent actions of a few police officers is just uncalled for.
Thank you again for joining us on this 710 KNUS virtual town hall with Congressman Ken Buck. I'm Steffan Tubbs. I appreciate you tuning in. And for all of you that submitted questions, we will get to your questions coming up in the hour that we have with the Congressman. We all know in this great country of ours, and I tell our audience all the time, we still live in a great country. And we all know that you're presumed innocent until proven guilty. I don't mean this to be an unfair question, and you feel free to answer or not, but do you feel that you witnessed a murder in that cell phone video?
Well, there isn't enough video to know what happened before the situation started. So I don't know if you're going to have a voluntary manslaughter, if you're going to have a premeditated murder charge. I'm not sure exactly where this goes, but there is no doubt in my mind that a homicide was committed and that justice should be done. And again, I say that because I've seen with my own eyes a video. But I, as a prosecutor, I have taken a lot of grief from radio hosts for not being willing to step out and say, I know the answer, because I don't know all the surrounding facts, but clearly a homicide took place. What exact charge is appropriate, it's difficult to say right now.
By the way, I want to add a disclaimer that I wasn't one of those radio hosts, just so we're all clear. Again, Congressman Ken Buck joining us on this 710 KNUS virtual town hall. As you know, Congressman, the George Floyd death was the spark that has ignited an inferno in this country. But I was just wondering, and I was thinking about this today, knowing that we would have this conversation, the larger perspective. The George Floyd death was horrible. I have personally, as a radio host and being in talk now, I feel like it was a murder. But take it from a bigger perspective. Why do you think that we are here as a nation? Because it is one man's death, but I think to so many of various racial makeup that this is emblematic. This is something that's going on in the country right now and has been for perhaps generations.
Yeah, and I spent the day in a hearing in Congress where I heard from the Democrat side that point of view just hammered over and over again, and I don't deny it. But the difficult thing about today's hearing for me was I think both sides are right, and that's a very difficult emotional circumstance to grapple with. There is absolutely no doubt that since the onset of slavery in the Western world, Africans that have been in this country, African Americans, blacks, have been discriminated against, have been mistreated. After the Emancipation Proclamation, after the Civil War, we had Jim Crow laws. We had just a series of very difficult situations. We started to turn the corner in the 1960s with Martin Luther King, the Civil Rights Movement, but we have not yet turned the corner. We have not yet really achieved equality, which is one of the goals that we have in this country, equality of opportunity, not necessarily equality of result. And the amazing thing is that as we grapple with this as a country, there are some outside, China, other countries that criticize the U.S. for the way that we deal with these issues. I challenge China to deal with questions as difficult as we are dealing with and come up with the right answer as often as we have come up with the right answer. We're not there yet. And I don't mean to suggest that we are. We have to do a better job in the inner cities where many African Americans live of educating young black children. We have to do a better job of giving young black children good role models. We have to do a better job of making sure that we don't flood these cities with insidious poisons like heroin and methamphetamine and other drugs. We have to do a better job in society of really promoting this idea of equality of opportunity. And then we can turn the corner on things like this. But I visited with one of the Republican witnesses today who is a pastor from Ohio. And he talked to me about the harassment that they see by big city police. That's not something that I've seen, frankly. I dealt with police in Weld County. I dealt with federal agents when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I haven't seen that personally. I believe people when they say that. We need to do a better job of community relations. I frankly think the Denver Police Department is outstanding. They've had great chiefs, great leadership for years. But I think we have a better job to do with police community relations in big cities.
And yeah, how to do that and how to move forward is certainly the question that we all want answered. Again, I thank you for joining us on this 710 KNUS virtual town hall with Congressman Ken Buck. I'm Steffan Tubbs, and I appreciate it. Ken, again, as I stated at the top of the hour, Congressman, as I stated at the top of the hour when we started this, that you were not given a list of questions from me, and your office does not know what I'm going to ask. And I want to really make that clear here to our viewing audience, that there's a method to my madness for this next question, and I think you're going to know it. So this may sound shocking at first, but bear with me. And I don't mean this to be anything more than making a point. I'm wondering, have you ever personally, Ken Buck, Coloradan, representative now in Washington, have you ever been considered a racist? And the reason I ask this is because that, Congressman, is so easily thrown around today that I think in many ways, I think it's almost diluted some of the real meaning of that. For example, and I'll say before I give it to you, is I have, and there is almost nothing that has made me want to run through a brick wall, throw a brick through a television. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know if you have, but you know, for those of us that believe in racial equality, and for those of us that have friends from all different races, to be accused of that, especially in times like this, I just think is so unproductive. And I hope you know where I was going with the question.
Sure. I have to tell you, I prosecuted for 25 years, and I have been considered everything. You never prosecute somebody because they committed a crime in their mind. You prosecute somebody because you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're anti-Semitic, you're whatever it is. Prosecutors are always accused of having ulterior motives for the prosecution that they're engaged in. Why me? There are 100 people that were speeding. Why did you choose me? You chose me because I am unique in this way. And so, yes, I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there that think Ken Buck's a racist. I would not be in Congress if I had thin skin. You know, I have to tell you something. I have called every name. I can tell you some things. I learned some swear words that I never knew, and I played football. I've been called by a coach, and yet I learned some new swear words about who I was from some people that didn't agree with me politically, both on the right and the left. And I didn't think there was anybody to the right of me, but I found out there are some people to the right of me. But yes, I have been called a racist. Yes, it's upsetting because as someone that is introspective and someone that cares about not just image but reality, it hurts to be called and to have that word thrown around the way it is. But I have to tell you, there are some people who use that word that I think have a right to use that word. And then there are other people who use that word that I just laugh at. How can you, as a privileged person, no matter what your skin color, no matter what your background is, how can you throw a word around like that after you have lived the life you've lived? So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about how people like me, or I wouldn't get a lot done.
Well, I think you said it best when, you got to have some pretty thick skin. I want just two more questions on what we're dealing with the country and being on the House Judiciary Committee. I'm wondering how it was to sit there and listen to one of George Floyd's brothers today. We played it on the radio show, extremely emotional. And I just to let you know, what I had said on the show was, very easy for someone to say, that person speaks a certain way, they're using this kind of language, they're not a good public speaker, look at how they're dressed, man or woman, any race or whatever. But the one thing that I tried to tell our audience tonight on the radio program was, had you told this gentleman 3 weeks ago today, that he was going to be testifying in front of the House Judiciary Committee, he would have said you are, he'd call you crazy. So how did you think that went for him? And it seemed to be emotional, at least listening to the audio.
It's emotional because it's genuine. He wasn't rehearsed. He wasn't coached. He was genuinely expressing emotion, and an emotion that, thank God I haven't had to talk about my children's death or my brother's death, and I commend him for coming to the Judiciary Committee and making a point and talking about the fact that it's very sad that his brother died, but if there is a greater cause that can be achieved from a senseless death, then that would be a good outcome, although nobody wants, obviously, the death in the first place. I was also impressed with Mr. Underwood's sister, who showed up, and I thought she did a great job. And again, you have somebody in law enforcement who was senselessly murdered a couple of weeks ago, and she just buried her brother and showed up. And I thought both of them made great points about how we need to be a more compassionate society and try to understand where each other's coming from.
We're going to get to COVID-19 in just a moment, and then our viewer and listener questions that were submitted via 710knus.com. My final question on the George Floyd situation for now is, as you're aware, though you were at a committee meeting today, the president met with African-American leaders, some of them today. How important do you think that is right now? Do you think it's important that the president hear from those African-Americans that may not be a Trump supporter, in getting that full picture, if you will, of what's going on? Because I think any of us wouldn't mind none of us would mind a round table if we know that we're surrounded by supporters. So kind of a two-parter. Should there be both voices, those that support President Trump and those that don't, from the African-American community? And I guess the big billion-dollar question is, will a meeting like this today or others like it in the future, in your estimation, really matter?
A lot to unpack there.
Sorry.
I am a Republican candidate. When I win, I am a congressman for all of the 4th Congressional District in Colorado, and really for all of Colorado. And the president, the day he wins, not the day he gets sworn in, but the day he wins, is the president-elect for the United States of America. And so it is absolutely important that he listens to everybody, that he cares about everybody's views, and that he expresses that to the people there today. It's also important, this is a two-way street, it's also important to be respectful of the president. Whether you agree with him or disagree with him, you have an obligation when you're in that White House and you're talking to the president of the United States to talk to the office, not the office holder. And I think it is really something that we are lacking in this country. And Steffan, it happened when I was going to Tea Party meetings and people were talking about President Obama, and it's happening now when people are talking about President Trump from the left. We've got to be respectful. We've got to show the president the respect that the office is due, and then hope that we can find that common ground to move forward on important issues like this. So yes, I think it matters. Yes, I think the president takes it very seriously. One of my closest friends in Congress is Mark Meadows, who now is the chief of staff. I know Mark. Mark's from North Carolina. Mark has a heart for these issues, and I know that Mark is doing his very best to make sure that this president is what has the background information and also a plan ready to go.
Well, I think you know as well as anybody, we could do an entire hour just on where we are currently in the country. But this comes at a time when the nation is dealing with an unprecedented pandemic as well. And I want to switch now to more of my questions on COVID-19, and then we'll get to our listener input as well. But I first want to give you the opportunity in this forum to speak to perhaps someone tuning in that maybe they lost their mother to COVID-19. Maybe they lost a neighbor. I just want to give you the opportunity to, I know that the entire congressional delegation from Colorado and everyone in the country feels for those people that have been so devastated, and we're looking at a death toll of well more than 100,000 Americans. Your message to those that have been impacted by COVID-19, and then we'll get into the business aspect of it.
Yeah, I think obviously I am someone that cares deeply about life, life from conception to natural death. And I think whenever there is an illness like this, whether it's Ebola, MERS, SARS, whatever it is that we're dealing with, it is tragic. And as great as our medical system is in this country, we're never going to be able to stop things like this from happening, worldwide pandemics that take lives. And I think it is tragic on an individual basis. It is tragic for a community to have lost so much talent, so many good people, so many people that had a heart for their community. So I am saddened that we have had as many deaths as we've had, and we've had as many really important, good people pass from this earth. It is terribly unfortunate that this happened. And my heart goes out to those that have suffered.
Let me ask you this about COVID-19 when it comes to the state of Colorado. Up in your neck of the woods in northern Colorado, they built one of the not shelters, but one of the places that could have taken overflow patients. There have certainly been a lot of critics talking about what's been done at the Colorado Convention Center. And I say, as a man of faith, thank God, literally, that we haven't seen that and those facilities needed. But as you well know, and I'm sure you're a congressman, you have heard this, and your phone lines in Colorado and in Washington, D.C. have been ringing off the hook from business owners that have been impacted. You and I sit here tonight, and I think it would be foolish of anyone to think that every business is going to come back. Talk about the business impact on that, and maybe just, I don't know, an anecdote or two about what you've heard from your constituents.
Sure. Well, I think that some businesses have been hit harder than other businesses. Certainly restaurants who operate on a thin margin to begin with have been really impacted by the financial shutdown that we have had. And I think that there are other businesses that have been impacted. And unfortunately, the way that these stay-at-home orders were enforced have impacted some businesses much more than other businesses, and really on an irrational basis. Yeah. If I can stand online to get food, why can't I stand online to get clothes? Why can't I buy clothes at Walmart because they have a pharmacy, and I can't buy clothes at a clothes store because they don't have a pharmacy? And there are some things that and it's difficult to criticize the governor because he's dealing with a lot of unknowns, and I think that there was panic, and I think there was overreaction. But in the time since that shutdown order began, we've gotten more information, and we should be able to make more rational decisions, and decisions that will hopefully minimize the financial burden on these businesses. But I have heard a lot of people that have come forward and talked to me about how they have gone out of business, or how they are going out of business, or the financial burdens. We have a very serious situation. Obviously, my home county of Weld is a large ag producer in the country, and we are going to see supply issues with various meats and vegetables and other products in America. And there's no reason. We still have the same demand, we still have the same supply, but because of this pandemic, we are going to have those kinds of shortages. And again, it may lead to more panic, and that would be unfortunate. But the reality is that this has really caused Americans, I hope, to come together and realize that we may have differences, but we are still Americans, and we need to unite and do our very best to overcome a worldwide situation like this.
I don't want to pit you against Governor Polis because he's not here, but I do have to ask you if you feel like, from your own observations, what was that?
That's the best time to pit me against Governor Polis.
Well, you got to tune in when you're back in Colorado, or you have time. Tune in, and you'll get an earful on the program. But I want to ask you: do you think, just quite simply, did Colorado open too late?
Well, I think Colorado closed in the wrong way, and I think Colorado could have opened in a more rational way earlier than it did. Yes, I believe that. But that's I also would challenge John Elway's draft picks sometimes, and I would certainly challenge the offensive coordinator's calls, play calling sometimes. So. I think with 2020 hindsight, it's easy to look back and say, I think we should have done it this way. With the information that he had available at the time, I don't know what that was. It's hard to say now whether he made bad judgments or not.
Yeah, I think time will tell. Final question on COVID-19, and again, this is another topic we could talk for an hour on. I'm really concerned about, as an American, I don't know how you couldn't, about the deficit increases. $3 trillion plus, and it sounds like maybe there's another round that possibly can be in front of you lawmakers in Washington, D.C. Do you feel the money has gone to where it needed to go to? And I guess the second part of that is, how in the world are we ever going to cut into that, whether that's in our lifetimes or our grandchildren's?
Steffan, that's a great question, and it's been my biggest concern when I got to DC, and it's my biggest concern when I look at these bills. I think that some of these bills were absolutely necessary, and the price tags were ridiculous but understandable. But when the speaker can continue to add on pork and other parts to the bills that weren't necessary, I voted against those bills. And what really caused me to vote against the bills was that we never had a discussion about how to pay them back. We never had a discussion about, we're now $30 trillion in debt. $30 trillion. You
can't even comprehend that.
No, we started the year at 20 trillion, and we're now at 30 trillion because we gave the Fed the authority to borrow $4 trillion. $4 trillion. So the $1 trillion we were going to have in deficit spending became, almost $9 or $10 trillion as a result of these bills. Absolutely crazy to think that we shouldn't be having a discussion about capping federal spending and the way that we were going to balance the budget was to rev up the economy, create more revenue for the federal government, limit spending, and hopefully that revenue would start eating away at the deficit. And
that's thrown out.
Pandemic,
that's thrown out. You can't do that right now.
We've got to have Plan B now. We've got to be talking about what do we do? And you know what? We're not going to have the military that we had in the past. And we're not going to have the healthcare system that we had in the past. We either act responsibly now or we pay a heck of a price, far greater than this pandemic ever would have cost us if we don't start acting responsibly on the spending side.
Final question for me, and I'm going to get to our viewer questions. I just want to know, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't know if you would consider yourself a lone wolf, a salmon swimming upstream, whatever analogy you want to use, but I'm wondering, in voting no, did you have to pay for that, so to speak, whether it's an email, phone calls, angry letters, whatever?
Oh, there are many people that are upset that I voted no because they feel like I missed the point of these bills. And I knew when I voted no, I wasn't going to be part of the majority.
Right.
We, out of 435 members, 6, 12, 34 voted no on some of these bills. But It was more a vote to say we've got to start talking about this deficit, because the debt that we have in this country, if there is ever a time where we go off the cliff, Germany can bail out Greece. No one bails out the U.S.
Right.
No one. And the worldwide crisis that will be caused by a debt restructuring or default in America will really cause huge pain and death across the world.
We're going to get to viewer questions for the Congressman now, and thank you for submitting these via 710knus.com. Congressman, this comes from Ed in Aurora, and these are wide-ranging topics, but Ed's question is, can Congress start doing what's right for the people versus what they think is best for their party? That from Ed in Aurora.
Sure. Well, Ed, here's the challenge. We have 435 members of Congress, and they represent some of the most liberal districts like Berkeley, California, and Madison, Wisconsin, and some of the most conservative districts like rural Texas and rural Mississippi and rural Alabama and other places. We have some of the wealthiest members in Congress, and we have some of the poorest members in Congress. We just have a wide range of interests. And so when you say, can we represent the people, who are the people? Who exactly are you talking about? And that is a challenge, because each of us has, I have a criminal justice background or a law enforcement background. Somebody else comes here as a doctor. Somebody else comes here as a general in the Marines. Somebody else comes here, as a social worker, as a postal worker. We've got people from all different backgrounds, and we come together. What is the major failure, in my view, of Congress is we don't take the time to learn about each other. We don't take the time to understand each other, and we don't take the time to reach a consensus with all those different backgrounds. The minute we have our last vote, we're on a plane back to our district, and I've got 22 counties. 20 of them are complaining that I haven't been there in the last week, while I'm in the other two that I could be in. And every member of Congress is the same way. And so, yes, I would love to spend more time with my colleagues. I would love to deal with the people's issues as I see them and as they see them. I think this is a party-driven place because you raise money through the party, you get reelected through the party. But I agree with Ed, the sentiment of Ed's question, that we should be dealing more with the people's issues.
This comes, Congressman, from Allison in Denver. What are you doing to support minorities in your district?
Yeah, I don't have a large African-American population in my district. I do have a large Hispanic population in my district, and I'm doing everything I can to improve education in America and in my district. I'm doing everything I can to make our economy stronger, because I believe a strong economy lifts all boats in the district. And I am absolutely blessed by having a great staff that is constantly communicating with people in the district and in Colorado generally about issues that we should be involved in. I certainly have programs in Congress that I have started, that I'm involved in, that promote the interests in historically Black colleges and in other areas. But I have to tell you, I believe that we are Americans first, and that everything I can do to help America in every way, healthcare, education, economy, is going to help all people in this country.
Next question, Congressman, comes from John in Jefferson County. In addition to refusing to wear ineffective, sometimes harmful masks in public, how do we effectively resist the unconstitutional restrictions placed on us by our governor and health department officials during their irrational reaction to COVID-19?
How do you feel about that, John?
Again, I'm just the messenger.
I understand the frustration, and I certainly don't like wearing a mask. And I think some of the policies that have been enacted are not the most efficient policies or the most well thought through policies. But I do think that the governor has great authority when it comes to an emergency situation. The courts have considered challenges to and that's the answer. The short answer to the question is taking a challenge to court the courts have considered challenges and have sided with the governors that they have this leeway. Now, as we get further and further away from the beginning of this pandemic, and as we perhaps get a vaccine or a cure, if governors are still acting in this way and putting restrictions on people, I think we'll have a better argument in the courts. But I think the best thing to do is to elect governors who see the world the way we see the world. I sat next to Ron DeSantis, who's now the governor of Florida, for 4 years in the Judiciary Committee. And Ron DeSantis has a completely different view of how to deal with COVID than Jared Polis does. And I think that if people in Colorado are fed up with the way they're being treated, the answer is not to complain. The answer is to get involved.
As I say, Congressman, all the time on the program, elections, yes, have consequences. And everybody should know that. And if you complain and you're not voting, I think that's on you. This next question is very interesting. This is from Ray, and Ray is in Maine. And it'll make sense after I read his question. Ray says, I left Colorado 4 years ago because the state is falling apart. The Republican Party is gutless and in bed with the Democrats, a, quote, uniparty. Ken Buck, do you see yourself as a part of the swamp meddling with elections? Again, I am just the messenger.
Well, Ray, I have to tell you something. I wrote a book about draining the swamp, and I have done everything I can in Washington, D.C. to drain the swamp. So, no, I don't consider myself part of the swamp, and I agree with your sentiments. When I ran for the U.S. Senate in 2010, I had 64 county chairs around Colorado. When I ran for Congress in 2014, about a third to a half of those county chairs had left the Republican Party and had registered as unaffiliated. Now, those were active Republican leaders in their counties, and they were fed up with the Republican Party. We talked about the national debt, Steffan. I have to tell you something that drives me crazy. The Republican Party is losing its brand when it doesn't stand up and say, enough of this spending. We have got to stop this. We are different than the other party. And there are so many other issues where we need to stand up. But the bottom line is that while there are some in the Republican Party who are seeking to compromise, there are many of us that are doing our very best to hold the line and to make sure that we are a stark contrast to the Democrats. Ronald Reagan said, "Don't paint with bland pastels, paint with bright colors," and I think that's what Republicans should do to win back voters and our brand.
You brought it up, and I have talked to you about your book about draining the swamp, but I'm going to give you a free commercial. Where can people find the book, and if it's still in print, and I'm sure it's a bestseller, and the title of the book?
Well, it's called Drain the Swamp, and it is still in print, and they can find it on Amazon, and it may still be in Barnes & Noble and some of the bookstores, but I have another one coming out on August 4th. You didn't know that you were giving me this opportunity.
I didn't. Is it Drain the Swamp Part 2?
The pre-sales are available right now, and it's really a kind of a cool idea, Steffan. I give a lot of tours in the evening of the U.S. Capitol, and all around the Capitol there are these great symbols, whether it's a story of Abraham Lincoln visiting the Capitol to talk to the Civil War soldiers, or whether it is a slave put the Statue of Freedom, was responsible for putting the Statue of Freedom on the dome of the Capitol. Right. There's just great stories that have great meaning, and I've written a book called Capital of Freedom, and it comes out August 4th.
We will preview that with you on the radio show for sure. Our next question, Congressman, comes from Barbara in Denver. This is back to what we're experiencing as a nation with the George Floyd situation. Barbara says or asks, what legislation will you introduce to change the culture in the police force to be more fair to African Americans and hold the police accountable if and when they overstep?
So I think it's really important to understand, I feel strongly that the federal government should not micromanage local police departments. I think that between the state legislature and the elected officials in Denver or wherever that police department is, those are the people who are responsible, and those are the people who meet the needs and listen to the needs best of their constituents in that particular town or city. So I think it's wrong when we try to nationalize a police department with federal laws. Having said that, there is a role for the federal government in civil rights, in the civil rights area, and we should be setting a bar that all police departments have to meet. Now, the Democrats are in the majority in the House. They have written a bill without Republican input. They have introduced that bill. The bill was discussed today in hearing. It will be marked up, which means it will be considered for amendments next week in the Judiciary Committee, and I will be part of that process of amending that bill. There are things in that bill that I am absolutely for, and then there are things in the bill that I think don't make sense. And so I have to make a judgment once I see that bill as to whether I will vote for it or not.
This is an interesting question that comes from Susan in Alamosa. While campaigning, she says 5. So I won't hold you to 5, but how about this? What are the most concise talking points to explain why voting Republican will benefit all Americans? That, my friends, we call a softball, and no, Congressman Buck did not know that that was coming. She wants 5. I don't know if you can probably give her 10, but what would you say?
Well, look, I think that the most important distinction between Republicans and Democrats, and the most important thing that people should consider, is with Democrat policies in the state of Colorado alone and across this country, we have seen a cost of living increase. When you require barbers to attend thousands of hours or hundreds of hours of classes to be qualified as a barber, when you regulate, landscape architects. Steffan, I don't really care if you put a lilac where an arborvitae should be or not. It is really up to the landowner, and it is up to the person he works with at the tree nursery to get that right. I don't think the state of Colorado needs to be regulating those areas. And by regulating so many areas, we have raised the cost of living. So number one, I think that we should have a smaller government, and we should reduce the cost of living to people by reducing that kind of regulation. Number two, I believe that Americans have the best ability to decide where to spend their money, not the government. And I think that lower taxes make more sense than higher taxes. Number three, I think that instead of telling someone that you're going to be arrested if you don't wear a mask, explain to people why it's dangerous for this disease to spread and how we can reduce the disease, and then ask people to be responsible and hold them accountable. But don't have law enforcement used as some sort of enforcement for this pandemic in ways that they were never intended to be used and cause conflict in the community. So I think there are a number of things, but it really comes down to big government versus small government and personal accountability. And that's why I'm a Republican and why I would encourage others to be Republicans.
Our next question comes from Kim in Broomfield. What is your plan for winning back the legislature this fall? Who can we talk to about donating money to certain candidates in swing districts?
Sure. So the plan is very simple. We are doing our very best to win the state Senate and do our best to chip away at the lead that the Democrats have in the state House. What we have to make sure that we keep an eye on and work very hard for is President Trump at the top of the ticket and Cory Gardner next in line on that ticket. As President Trump goes, as Cory Gardner goes, so goes the rest of the ticket. And we need to make sure that we are supporting them, and then our state legislators, our county commissioners, our district attorneys, and others. So if they go online and look up cologop.org, they can contact the state party and they can find out where the swing districts are. And after, after June 30th, we will know who has won primaries, if there are primaries in those districts. And that anybody interested in donating will know how to donate money to candidates in districts that we believe are winnable in November.
And I would just add, be sure you actually vote. It's just a little bit of importance coming up. This is my question, and then we'll get back to our viewer questions. And thank you again so much for the time you've given. My question would be, when you look at everything that we're going through, I've wondered sometimes, and especially because I knew I'd be talking to you tonight, you got a lot on your plate, with taking over the position you have within the state GOP, and then still being a congressman and still trying to, all of what many of the questions have already outlined. How do we win back the state legislature? How do we make this a better country? How do we, solve, at least in baby steps, the racial divide and all of that? I'm just curious as to, that's a lot on your plate. I wonder how much free time you're getting these days. And I don't mean that to be a softball question, but that's a lot to tackle.
So between Congress and the state party and writing a book, I don't have a life. That's the easy answer for you.
You know what? I think that's a fair answer.
I have to tell you, I have a lot of passion for our state and a lot of passion for our country. And I feel like if I don't do everything I can, I have no right to criticize somebody else. I have no right to go to sleep at night until I know that I've done everything. And when I've done everything, win, lose, or draw, I feel good that I have done my part. And I have raised two beautiful children, and I have encouraged them to do everything they can, whether it's in politics or whether it's just being in a community and working at a homeless shelter or helping at a food bank. It doesn't matter. We have all got to step forward and do what we can to make this country better.
This Congressman comes from Judith and Parker. The Republican Party has lost many in this state. What is the Republican Party doing to become desirable to the conservative independent and those that believe in balanced budgets and our Constitution to regain our trust and the state of Colorado? I think you've kind of addressed that a little bit, Judith's question from Parker.
Well, and I think Judith answered her own question. I think it is so important that we balance the budget. I think it's so important that we have low tax rates and give people the ability to spend their own money. I think it's so important that we don't burden future generations with the generational theft that is going on now in America. I think what Judith said is exactly right. We need to reach out to those unaffiliated voters and convince those unaffiliated voters that we are the only thing that stands between our citizens in Colorado and tax increases and more regulations and the kind of burdens that the Democrats, led by Jared Polis, want to place on Coloradans.
Next question comes from Sean. It's a little wordy, but I'll try to make sense of it. Why did Congress, number one, mandate paid sick leave for every business and extend its application? Number two, add $600 a week to unemployment benefits, which reduces the incentive to return to work. I think personally that's a very valid point. And she says it hurts small businesses. And why is there a suggestion of extending that?
Well, I have to tell you, Representative Budd and I have introduced the Get Americans Back to Work Act, which would not allow Americans to receive unemployment in excess of what their jobs paid that they were let go from.
Right.
And so that tries to deal with that $600 issue. In House, it will go nowhere. Perhaps the Senate will be able to put it on a bill, but I hope it, and I didn't vote for those things, and I hope they don't get extended because it is a disincentive. We learned that in the Obama administration, that when you pay people more to stay out of work, they will stay out of work. And we need to get people back into the workforce. And I think to get our economy going again, we need to make sure that we limit unemployment benefits. Those restaurants that are opening need to hire people, and they're having trouble finding people. The other shops that have closed temporarily are starting to reopen now. We need to make sure that we encourage workers to go back to work and be productive.
We've got about 5 more minutes left with Congressman Ken Buck, kind enough to join us on this 710 KNUS virtual town hall. And we hope to have you on again. And I know you'll be on the show because I definitely do want to talk to you about your upcoming book later this summer. This question comes from Brenda. And she says, we're in need of quick action to this ridiculous desire to reduce our police force and turn this wonderful state into chaos. who will hear our call of help? I would assume she's talking about law enforcement. Who's going to help them? This kind of is a good way to maybe wrap up because it's how we started. But defunding and disbanding police departments, I don't know how, frankly, this is me, how anyone with common sense could think that's a good idea. Reform, yes. Taking a look under the microscope, yes. But I guess to Brenda's question, she wants to know what your plan would be to tackle those issues.
So I think what we have to do is we have to reform. We have to give people confidence that the police care, that they are going to deal with the bad actors in their police departments and not just sweep dangerous issues under the rug. But I have to tell you, I also think it's important for every citizen to go give a police officer a hug. And I understand during a pandemic that may not be social distancing. But today, a lady came up to me and she had baked 80 cookies for the Capitol Police officers. And I had those cookies delivered to the Capitol Police officers. And she had a young daughter, a 5-year-old daughter. And I said, why don't you have your daughter just take a piece of paper and write thank you and draw a little picture of a police officer and let me bring that to the police officers. And I think that's what everybody in Colorado, everybody in America needs to do, is to make sure that those men and women in blue understand how much we love them, how much we appreciate them. And if we do that, we'll at least raise morale so that we can get through this difficult time, make the reforms necessary, but make sure we keep the right people in those uniforms.
I want to thank our viewers and those that visited 710knus.com for their questions. Obviously, we had many, many more, but we want to be respectful of the Congressman's time. And we also want to thank our sponsors for this virtual town hall, our friends at Alpha One Tax and Wealth. You can find out more with them at alphaonewealth.com. I want to end on something. This is from me, Congressman. And again, I greatly thank you for the time. I look forward to our next visit on the radio program. Yesterday, I was very struck at the George Floyd funeral. There was one of George Floyd's nieces, and I'm not sure if you had a chance to hear this, but I'll summarize by saying 6 words. When has America ever been great? And I was at first, my knee-jerk reaction was, how could she say that? I consider myself a patriot. I know you do as well. Then I felt sad. And I just ask you, I guess, with some final words and comments from you, do you feel America is still great? And I know the answer to that, but I want to ask because, many parts of the country and, in fact, probably around the world heard that niece yesterday in pain and in part of her eulogy to her uncle say, when has America ever been great?
Sure, and I understand the frustration that someone must feel when they've lost a loved one and when they are hurting like that. But at the same time, I would invite someone to look at the history of the world and challenge them to find a country that has been greater than the United States of America, a country that has made serious mistakes like had slavery, interned Japanese Americans, all the mistakes that we have made. But one of the things that I'm proudest about this great country is that we do look at ourselves. We are introspective. We are a country that recognizes that we are not perfect, and sometimes we're not even good, but we're always great because we look and we make repairs and we do things better down the road. And so I would say, yes, we are a great country. We have been a great country. We're founded on an absolutely revolutionary principle that the people are in control of their government. And I am extremely proud of being an American and extremely proud of serving the people of Colorado.
Amen. Can we end on a funny?
Sure.
Did you see the picture of Jerry Nadler today with his mask on, but it was pulled down and his nose was exposed? I don't know if you saw that. He was close to you.
Now they're trying to put on a mask, taking off a mask, wearing a mask. I won't comment because out of respect to other members of Congress, I shouldn't criticize, but I think the smile said it all.
I think the photo does say it all. Congressman Ken Buck, we can't thank you enough for joining us and for taking time out. I know it's been a hell of a day for you and as a member of the House Judiciary Committee, but I look forward to having you on the program again. again, to you and your staff, I just want everybody to know that you're always accommodating. And when we put out the call, I know that if I don't get Ken Buck on the show, it's for a pretty damn good reason. So as always, sir, thank you, and God bless the USA.
Thank you, and God bless you and your listeners. Congressman
Ken Buck. Again, thanks for joining us on this 710 KNUS virtual town hall with the Congressman, sponsored by our friends at Alpha One Tax and Wealth, alpha1wealth.com. For our program director, Kelly Michaels, and for our in-studio director and our chief of staff, Mark Crowley, I'm Steffan Tubbs. Have a great night. We'll talk to you on the radio tomorrow, 3 to 7, and don't forget Peter Boyles tomorrow morning, 5 to 9. Good night. Thanks for watching, and God bless.